What's going on, everybody? I'm Jerry, and today we have my Week 18 power rankings where I'm going to go through all 18 teams and let you know where they rank amongst each other. You guys know what power rankings is. I've been pretty accurate in these past couple weeks. Not that you can be accurate, but with my picks and projecting where teams are going to be, watch my picks videos because I was 13-3 or 12-4 in money line and against the spread last week. So it was a great week. Make sure to watch those. Like, comment, and subscribe. And let's get right into this Week 18. This team, Panthers. Panthers stay where they're at. That was great. I flubbed that whole intro to the Panthers. That's all right. You know the Panthers are at 32. They don't move. They stick right there in the back. They get smoked by the Jaguars with C.J. Beathard in, who did not look very good. Panthers lose. We don't need to talk about them very much. That's where they belong. Commanders actually stayed in the game earlier against the 49ers. It was 10-10. I want to say maybe even at half. Maybe it was 13-10. Maybe I'm not remembering it right. But it was close into halftime. The Commanders, for some reason, are giving up on Sam Howell. So they stay back here because of how incompetent their defense is and not knowing what to do at quarterback. They don't really have a known running back, like a set running back. They have Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, those guys, but other than that, there's really not much going for them. So they stay at the 31 spot. Like I said, not a lot of movers in the end for me. The Jets, another loss. They just, on defense, did not look good again. They allowed way too many points to the Browns, and they were able to put up some points, but it was garbage time, and it didn't look very good for the Jets. So they stay at 30. None of these teams really did anything major to make me move one ahead from the other. The actual score differences between the Jets and the Commanders were pretty close. So they stay there at 30. The Giants, they stay where they're at as well. I still think the Giants are a little bit better. They played a really close game and almost won. Very winnable game, but don't end up winning. So Giants end up staying where they're at 5-11. Better record than the Jets, but I think recency bias would just tell you that the Giants are still better. And throughout the whole season, you could say the highs for the Jets were probably higher, but the Giants are kind of a mess, so they stay at 29, perfectly with their points per game on offense and defense rankings. New England Patriots couldn't move them either, especially hanging in a close game against the Bills. Bills only won by a touchdown. I did predict this one that the Bills would win, but the Patriots would cover because there was this enormous 13.5 spread, which didn't make sense to me. But the Patriots' troubles on offense have kind of kept them towards the bottom. Even if their defense plays decent, then their offense can't score enough. And there's been a lot of games where their defense even struggled this year. But the New England Patriots stay at 28 with that 4-12 record, ahead of some of those other teams, again, just because of their incompetent ability to do anything with the ball. Just like the Chargers, who Easton sticks in. You can't wish much. Eckler's had an off year. Keenan Allen was out. And it was tough to move this team. So I left them. I still think healthy, and they're probably much higher if they're healthy, maybe at least closer to low 20s, high teens with Herbert in. But their defense, despite all of the weapons, has not been great. And not weapons on defense, but you know what I mean. The Khalil Mack, Bosa, Derwin James, probably forgetting people, but Chargers, they're supposed to have a good team. They fire their coach, and that ends up keeping them towards the end of the power rankings. They haven't played well really much at all this year. The Tennessee Titans, horrible loss, blowout loss. Not a good game for them. It wasn't really ever even close. It doesn't seem like, I don't know if they can say that they're confident that Levis is going to be the guy. It seems like the guy pictured next to me, Derrick Henry, is going to be on his way out, and it might be time for him there. They have DeAndre Hopkins, which has been kind of useless. He gets the big catch every once in a while from Levis saying, fuck it, hops down there somewhere. But other than that, there hasn't really been much going for him. They kind of strived in, having a good defense and a strong run game, and the defense has kind of fallen off towards the end of the year, and the run game hasn't been what it's used to be. So Titans move back, and that was more to move up this next team, the Arizona Cardinals, who get a massive win over the Eagles. Just didn't want to overreact to it. I thought this game was more of a negative against the Eagles, especially with how they've been playing recently, than a positive to the Cardinals. So still a big win for the Cardinals, obviously beating, probably still a top 10 team in the league in the Eagles. Not quite the juggernaut that they've been. But the Cardinals do move up a spot. You beat the Eagles, you've got to move up. I just couldn't move them past any of these teams coming up. I think you could make an argument for the Raiders, but they've been playing really good football. I left the Raiders at where they're at. You can see their defense, 8th in points per game. They're still way up there. Their offense hasn't been good, but if Aiden O'Connell can do well, and they played a good game with even with Aiden O'Connell being in, you're missing Josh Jacobs. They don't know how to get the ball to Devontae Adams. I feel like that's a big problem. When I think Jacoby Myers he might have more yards this year. He's at least in the games I've watched, he's gotten more opportunities and looked better. Maybe it's just because you're seeing him more than Devontae Adams to me. Maybe I'm missing something, but Raiders, they still have a lot of problems, but Antonio Pierce has got that team going and got them to win games that they probably shouldn't have. And I think a little bit of a spark to show hope for the team and maybe some Raiders fans moving forward. But Raiders stay where they're at. Next we have the Falcons. They move back a spot, get blown out by the Bears. They tried to come back. It was a 10-point game in the third quarter. Bears end up running away with it with the 20-point victory. And, you think the Titans are going to kind of fight. Arthur Smith's just been having a hard time. It seems like he's going to get fired too, so we'll see what happens there. But Falcons losing to the Bears, who have looked like a better team recently. They have to move back. I just couldn't move them back past the Raiders yet. Again, I still think highly of the Raiders, given their situation. 24 is by no means high, but couldn't move the Falcons past the Raiders yet, especially with those problems. But they moved back one spot to 23 at 7-9. Next team is the Minnesota Vikings, one of our biggest movers. We have a couple teams that move 3 spots this week, but the Vikings just get absolutely blown out by the Packers. It wasn't ever a close game. They don't know what they're doing at quarterback. I think there's a lot of good pieces. You still have Hawkinson. You still have Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison has looked like a hero, and the defense has shown out. You see 12th in points per game, 16th in yards per game, because of guys like pictured next to me, Danielle Hunter, and Brian Flores calling a great defense. Ivan Pace shining this year, has been probably one of the best undrafted free agents. I can't think of a lot of other ones. Obviously, you got Puka Nacua as a 5th round pick, that's kind of shining, but Ivan Pace has kind of slept down. He's been good. He misses some plays, but for an undrafted free agent, he's been phenomenal. And, just kind of hoping that the defense, Brian Flores is probably on the move. I would assume he's going to want to take a head coaching job if he can. There's a chance he comes back to Minnesota, especially with how that defense has been playing, if they can get a quarterback, but it doesn't seem like the situation for him. So it'll be interesting to see if they are able to have as strong of a defense next year if he's not there, because he's been very, very heavy on the blitz, averaging over 50% blitz their whole season, and being able to beat the teams once, like the Bears. Next team, I put them ahead just because of how inept the Vikings looked against the Bears, and then we have a Bears-Packers game coming up this weekend, and I think the Bears will at least be able to keep closer in the game than the Vikings, and I thought that was a good enough reason to move the Vikings past the Bears. It didn't seem like, especially with their problems at quarterback. I mean, you see Justin Fields here next to me making some unbelievable plays and finally making a lot of accurate throws, more throws on time, not as much anticipation as I'd like to see, but Justin Fields has been doing a lot better. Their defense has turned into, I believe they've been like top 3 in run defense, and their pass defense has been great too. Jalen Johnson gets banged up, and you have Tyreek Stevenson and Terrell Lewis showing out. And Kyler Gordon is Spider-Man. He's nuts, and his celebrations are great. So I like a lot of what's going on that defense, and I think they were deserving of being ahead of the Vikings, so they move up a spot at 7-9, and almost in the positives with their point differential. But the Packers, this is where we find it out. Packers are 8-8, fighting for a playoff spot. If they win, they're in. I believe they would need some teams to lose to make it happen, but they have a high chance of getting in if they win. So this is a very important game for them, and hopefully the Bears can take them down. It would be a repeat of last season of what the Lions did, where that's what people talked about might be able to happen with the Bears early on, is if they do what the Lions did last year. Lions went 5-1 in the last 6. Bears, if they win, would go 5-1 in the last 6, and they would beat the Packers to not make the playoffs, but to keep them out of the playoffs. So if the script maybe got moved from last year, maybe they just copy pasted it. We'll see, and just scribble out the Lions and put the Bears. Maybe that's what's going to happen. But Green Bay Packers at 20, moving up, made sense. Obviously, they murdered the Vikings, so they had to be past them. Staying ahead of the Bears, though, as of right now. Pittsburgh Steelers move up. They get a win. I'm still not, excuse me, I'm still not very high on them. They don't know what they're doing at quarterback. Mason Rudolph's looked good in these past couple weeks, and finally getting George Pickens the ball as he should. He's a great receiver. Should be the number one. Not to knock Deontay Johnson, but what George Pickens can do when he's targeted and not blocking, preferably in these last couple weeks, although early on was a great blocker. I think, when he's getting the ball, if you have Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, that's a nice two-headed monster in the backfield. The Steelers' defense is still the Steelers' defense. T.J. Watt's been phenomenal across from Highsmith. Love to see all that. They got Joey Porter Jr. has been playing all right. So I like the Steelers, just not that much. This is very low at 19 for 9-7, but their playoff chances are also very low. So we'll see what happens moving forward with the Steelers. But they move up a spot to 9-7. They get a win and pass the Vikings up as well. Next, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had to lose. They played the Saints. I thought they might win, but I still think the Saints are a better team, and the Saints proved that they are in this game, where they beat them pretty convincingly. I believe because of a tiebreaker, I think the Buccaneers are still favored to make the playoffs right now, but with a Buccaneers loss and a Saints win, I believe the Saints would take over. I can't remember exactly how all the situations work. But either way, whatever team makes it in that division, I think they are just going to get murdered in the playoffs. I don't think they should have a rule where if there's another team in the NFC that's clearly better than whatever team between the Saints, Falcons, Buccaneers, and Panthers, if there's a better team, just send that team in because they don't look good at all. But the Buccaneers move back 2 spots in that loss against the Saints. To 8-8, and they move back 2 spots in my rankings to 18, right behind the Saints, who are also 8-8. You look at the points per game and yards per game for offense and defense, 14th and 16th, and 6th and 13th is phenomenal. I'm ranking them below all of those rankings. Now, that's not what it's all about. You see the plus 44, and you say that looks good. There's people questioning. They don't think Derek Carr is going to be the guy. And just kind of running into problems where they're having trouble winning games. Now, this one was a good win. I just talked about how I don't think the Buccaneers are very good. So that doesn't prove very much to me. The Saints move up 1 spot in their win over the Buccaneers to 17. Then next we have the Broncos. Broncos are at 16. I have them move up a spot. They get a win, which if you watch my picks video, almost identical to the score. I predicted exactly a 7-point differential between the teams. I just got the scores off. So I think it predicted 20-13, and it was 16-9. So it was close there, and I knew the Broncos would win. The Chargers just don't look good. I was tempted to not move the Broncos up because of how bad the Chargers have looked, but I thought they were worthy of staying ahead of the Saints. So that's what they end up doing, moving up 1 spot to 16, back into the top half. Still at minus 3-point differential. We know that's all from the Dolphins early on this season, the 70-20 game. 15 is the Seattle Seahawks. They move back 2 spots to get a loss. You got to move back. They didn't play a good game. I'm not sure what's going to happen for the Seahawks moving forward. It's been a tough season for them, a lot of ups and downs. Kind of hoping Geno was going to be the guy, and then you put in Drew Lock for a game, and Drew Lock, I think, recently it was 1 game, but he looked better than I thought than Geno Smith was doing. And I think it's smart to keep with Geno Smith because of how great of a season he had last year. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens moving forward. There's a lot of talent, a lot of weapons over there. Kenneth Walker, you got DK Metcalf, you still have Lockett. There's a lot of weapons. So I'm interested to see what happens moving forward. They just got JSN, so unfortunate for them. But the Seahawks move back 2 spots in their loss to 8-8, more or less to move other teams up, like the Colts who get a win. I don't know what to think of the Colts either, though, because this whole season, which, mind you, has been a good season, has been with Gardner Minshew. And we didn't get to see, I'm sure, as much as anybody wanted to, of the exciting prospect in Anthony Richardson. And you can only hope that Anthony Richardson is learning from Gardner Minshew, because Gardner Minshew has been playing good football, and it's going to be kind of a shame if they, what are you going to, you got to go with the first round top 5 pick guy in Anthony Richardson, but Gardner Minshew does good. Is he able, with how he's played this year, to get trade compensation? I'm sure there's plenty of quarterback needy teams out there that would want to go with him. The first team that comes to mind for me, the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings don't know what they're doing next year. I've heard talk of maybe Kirk coming back. I'm sure Justin Jefferson would want that. They're losing games, and now their picks falling to where, what if they can get Michael Penix or Jaden Daniels or one of those quarterbacks in the draft? Jaron Hall has looked bad enough to where they bench him every time they put him in, and Nick Mullins clearly isn't the future. So maybe you do a trade with the Vikings. I personally like that fit, but enough talk about Gardner Minshew. The Colts win the game. They move up a spot to 14 at 8-8. Next we have the Cincinnati Bengals, who are eliminated from playoff contention despite being 8-8. And Joe Burrow hasn't been playing. It's tough to move them around, but I still think that they're a good football team. Even with Jake Browning in, it seemed right to move them up. I think they're ahead of the Colts. I think they're ahead of all those teams I mentioned, the Seahawks, the Broncos. I think that's fair to keep them there, but I don't see this team to be a threat, and I think probably after the last week, I don't see them being able to move up from 13. I think it's only back from here, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but they're eliminated from the playoffs, and I have them at 13th. So again, that's partially because you got teams like the Buccaneers that are going to be in the playoffs. So, or Buccaneers or Saints, I guess it would be. But Cincinnati Bengals do move up one spot to 13. More just kind of shuffling the other teams around, being more worthy. You couldn't move them past the Texans, who get a massive win in this game, and it wasn't really ever close. It was the Titans again, I believe, and it was a huge win for them. Just couldn't move them up past these next two teams. Couldn't make it into that top 10. It's going to be really tough. That 10 is kind of locked down. So the Texans stay where they're at 8-8, and the Jaguars stay where they're at 11. I just couldn't move this team. I thought, you get a huge blowout victory, but it's over the Panthers. And if you look at the teams in this top 10, it's very tough to move any of them out, in my opinion. You look at the offense with C.J. Beathard, it looked fine. Ideally, you're going to want Trevor Lawrence back in there. But they had to stay at 11 for me. Maybe I'm too high on this next team, that next team being the Los Angeles Rams. But I'm high on them right now. And I thought they were worthy of being in the 10. I left them where they're at. That's where they were last week. So I left them at 10. That's where they're staying. It just makes sense to me. They get a win. It was a close game, a close win over a not great football team, but they've continued to win. They played good games. I think Kyren Williams has been a huge emergence for them this year, and even in the beginning of the year, Puka Nacua. And with their defense just kind of playing well enough, and Stafford slinging it, making the plays that he needs to do, I think they're a team to worry about in the playoffs, especially because they are going to be an underdog in any game that they're in. And everyone's going to say, the Rams. People might think of the Rams like I think of the Buccaneers and the Saints, whereas, they'll be in the playoffs, but they're not going to do anything. I think the Rams could be that team. So I had to leave them in the top 10. Excuse me, and that's where they stay. Philadelphia Eagles have to move back. That's just atrocious. To lose, couldn't move them past the Rams, obviously, but you can't lose to the Cardinals like that, especially they had a convincing lead at one point. I want to say it was 21-6. And they just blew it. They just completely blew it. Kyler Murray was dotting up that defense, and it showed how bad that defense is. Now they have, I believe it's Matt Patricia calling plays. They switched out Sean Desai, and it looks worse. So I was a big fan of Sean Desai, being a Bears fan. He was a DB coach, I want to say, in Chicago, and I thought he was great. I was hoping they'd promote him to defensive coordinator with all the coaching switches, and they demoted his play calling abilities in Philadelphia, and then it looked worse. So I don't know if that has much connection, but Matt Patricia clearly was not doing it because their defense just completely fell apart in the second half of this game and let the Cardinals come back and get the win. So unfortunate for the Eagles fans, but they have to move back to 9. With the bad losses and the close games with bad teams they've had, they're just not worthy anymore, and they'll move out of the top 10 for sure if they lose to the Giants next week. Kansas City Chiefs. They get a win. over the Bengals. They move up a spot. I know I just talked about the Bengals. It was a close game with their backup quarterback against Patrick Mahomes. That's why the Bengals stayed where they're at. I think the Chiefs definitely deserve to move past the Eagles because they have not looked good. Their offense hasn't been as good. Their play calling has been bad. I will say that. And they haven't had the ball as much, and it makes it harder on the defense. So that's maybe a bit of an excuse for them. But the Chiefs' defense, on the other hand, has been great. And that's kind of what's been keeping them in games when Patrick Mahomes throws everybody the ball and they drop it and they just double and triple team Kelsey, and then he can't make plays. And even when he's gotten opportunities, he's had a lot of drops this year. Or maybe it seems like a lot because they show him because he's Travis Kelsey. But Kansas City Chiefs do move up one spot to 8, really just to pass the Eagles because the Eagles have not looked good. Okay, now let's talk about the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions should have won the game. To me, obviously everybody's making the comments about the call. They had to move up for me because I feel like they should have won this game, and it was against the Cowboys, who I have very high up, clearly, because I haven't said their name yet. So Detroit Lions, to me, were very worthy of moving up this spot. Again, this is kind of passing the Eagles as well, but they had to move up. They played great football, and they played winning football. The refs just kind of screwed them over at the end, and they lose the game. So they move up a spot to 7. Despite a loss, I think it was worthy. They're clearly better, again, than the Eagles that we talked about. And then we have the Dolphins. Do move down a spot. Actually moved down 3 spots. I seem to have put the wrong number in the corner, but they moved down 3 spots. They were up at 3 last week. I had them as a high team, and they just got absolutely murdered by the Ravens. So when you get murdered, it's the best team in the league, but they didn't even look close. The Ravens were putting in their backups, and just Tyler Huntley was slinging it all over the place, and Bradley Chubb goes down too, so it's going to be really tough for them moving forward. They looked like they were kind of this offensive juggernaut that would always be able to keep up with the other team, even if their defense didn't play great. Then their defense started playing well, and it ended up this game they just got blown out by the Ravens. So they moved back 3 spots, not the one pictured there, but they moved back 3 to the 6th spot. The Buffalo Bills stay where they're at. Again, close game against the Patriots, weren't worthy of moving up in that win, but I didn't think they could move past the Dolphins with how bad that loss was to the Ravens. So they had to stay there. Buffalo Bills stay at 5. And then this next team, this is where we get the Cowboys. Kind of controversial because, again, they did get the win, and the Lions probably should have gotten the win. But I think the Cowboys are still one of those top teams. And, I was low on them. I still think in the playoffs they could be one of those teams that loses. And maybe the karma will come back to bite them because I don't think super highly of the Cowboys. And it only seems right now that the Lions got screwed over that maybe in the playoffs something will happen and the Cowboys will get screwed over because that would make sense for the Cowboys. But the Cowboys stay where they're at 4. And the team that jumped these last 3 teams that flip-flopped with the Dolphins is the Cleveland Browns. I'm very high on the Browns. I know it was a win over the Jets, maybe not worthy of moving up this far, but it was a convincing win. It wasn't close. They looked good in all aspects. And you look at the teams behind them. The Bills played a close game against the Patriots, and the Dolphins got murdered by the team this is the team they flipped with. The Dolphins get murdered by the Ravens, and then you also have the Cowboys who pretty much lost. So if you compare all 4 of those games, I know it's recency bias too, but the Cleveland Browns have been playing winning football. Joe Flacco's been that guy, and they're worthy of moving up to 3. I think they are one of the few teams that's going to be able to fight against Baltimore moving forward in the AFC. San Francisco 49ers, very worthy of the 2 spot. They didn't have any reason to move up or down. I thought they played too close of a game against the Commanders. Obviously, they ran away with it and won 27-10, but it was 10-10 for a long time in that game. But the 49ers are still the 49ers, best team in the NFC, and number 2 on the list to the team that should clearly be number 1 in the Baltimore Ravens. You murder the Dolphins, who I had at 3 last week, and moved to 13-3. Plus 210 on the point differential is insane. First in points per game on offense, second in defense. Flip-flop those. Second in offense, first in defense. Just playing great winning football. Very deserving of the number 1 spot. I don't even think it's really that close, especially after these last 2 weeks. Very easy to leave them at number one. And then this is going to be the second to last. We'll do a power rankings moving forward. I also want to come out with some playoff content. But let's look at all the teams. So this is where I can show you the Dolphins. I did put that incorrectly. It was 3, not just the one spot. But you got the Eagles. They move back. I don't see anything wrong here. I think you could make an argument that the Rams are too high. I think maybe you could move the Texans possibly up to 10 and then slide back the Rams and the Jaguars. But I think 13 for the Jaguars is pretty far. I don't know. I think, again, the Bengals. I think the Bengals could probably move back, but I didn't really feel comfortable moving them behind the Colts, the Seahawks, the Broncos, any of those teams. So I like where they're at. I think the Bears could move up. I think they could break into that top 20. I mean, they will, I guess, if they beat the Packers. But I think even if the Bears, if it's a close game and a loss and the Steelers look really bad, I think they could both move up a spot. Or there's a good chance between the Saints and the Buccaneers, if one of those plays a really bad game, I think they could move back pretty far. I think the Vikings could keep moving down, unfortunately, but I think everything else is pretty accurate. So let me know what you think. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Stay tuned. I'm going to have a picks video coming out either Wednesday or Thursday. And then I've got a lot of playoff content coming soon. And I'm going to change my setup. I know some of the last videos have been a little choppy. I'm working on changing my setup. It's just been tough to do, excuse me, with work and doing this and other stuff outside. So it's been tough there. So once the playoffs and the Super Bowl are all done, I'm definitely going to have it. I'm going to try to work on it to get it done sooner. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.